The conversation in this podcast is especially meaningful to me. If you've ever had significant loss in your life, you know the depth of the grief that you experience. And that is why I'm so grateful to have Hana Mäkinen on the podcast today. She shares insight in how we can live and love through the grief of the ones we've lost. And this is such a beautiful conversation that we've had with so many aspects of how we navigate grief. How do we show up for ourselves? How do we honor those we've lost? And how do we live when we've lost someone so significant in our life? Hana Mäkinen is a professional animal communicator, end-of-life, afterlife, and grief specialist. She helps pet parents navigate the pet's illnesses, diagnoses, senior years, and end-of-life and afterlife journeys. By sharing their pets' messages and perspectives and supporting them in their grief, she guides them through their pain, fears, and worries, and helps them discover a place of peace and acceptance amid their pain. Hana is a beautiful gift, and I am so grateful for everything that she has brought to this podcast today. She just shares such depth of understanding and empathy for significant loss that she has also experienced in her life. And this conversation is just so deeply meaningful, and I hope it brings you some sense of peace and guidance in how you can navigate life if you're going through grief in your life. All right, welcome back to another episode of Rewiring Health. I am so grateful to have Hana Mäkinen here. Thank you so much for being here, Hana.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited.
Yeah, I mean, we're friends, and we, support each other through our business adventures. And I'm just so grateful for you coming on today, because we're going to talk about something that has personally impacted us and has impacted so many people. And it's something that a lot of times we go through it ourselves and not realizing how to go through it in a healthy way and to really heal. And what we're talking about is grief. And just to share a little bit about ourselves so that we kind of have an idea of, that we have an idea of what grief feels like, is that, I've shared through my podcast, lost my brother about a year ago now. And we were very, very close. And he was just an amazing person. And just, he was my big brother, the person I always looked up to, and was always there, no matter what you need him for, he was there for me. And so I am personally going through a lot of grief with his loss, and there's so many aspects to it, and it's every day is different. And just prior to losing him, we had lost our dog a few weeks prior. So there were so many things that were going on around that time. So there'll probably be parts that come up in this that, just can very much relate to grief, but that's what we're going to talk about today. So, and Hana, I would love for you to share some of your experiences, because I know that this has deeply impacted you as well.
Oh gosh, it's deeply impacted me. The reason I do the work that I do is I have had I was afraid of death. I was afraid of dying. My parents never knew how. I mean, back in the 70s, no one knew how to talk about grief anyway, and we were always told to shuffle it under the rug. And just recently, I just recently I finished a decade of walking an end of life journey on a daily basis, as well as the end of a decade of both of my parents, my father having Alzheimer's and my mom having a form of dementia. And it's just over 11 months now since mom died. And I was very present in both of their end of life care, and more so with mom. And I was dad's advocate and got him moved across the country and helped him that way. And prior to mom's passing, I had a major life change. And about 10 months after that, my soul dog died. And I had less than 24 hours from when he was diagnosed with a 9-inch tumor to the only available time that the vets could have a euthanization for him was within short of 24 hours. And that really devastated me. And then about 4 or 5 months after that, I guess it was a year after that, then mom really started going downhill. So I moved and packed and changed everywhere where I was living and went and cared for her for 10 months before she passed. And um, the triggers, I really say, like, mom gifted me. Each of my parents gifted me. And I know that sounds like the weirdest thing to say. Um, it was the messiest time, the hardest time, such a huge growth time for both of us. And Alzheimer's and dementia, it just robs them every day. So I'm losing them daily, but then I still had these total precious moments where I actually learned to decipher in the end, what was their disease talking? When was it actually mom and dad? When was it actually who they were as a woman and as a man and as a person and as an individual? And then sometimes I swear the greater spirit and the soul would speak through them in such a wisdom, for a message that I would need to hear in that moment. And we would just oscillate through all of that. And I learned in that really emotional journey, really how to be present with them. And I remember, like, when my dad was dying, it's 7 years now that he passed. I asked a really good friend of mine who'd lost both her parents. I'm like, what do you wish you would have done differently? She goes, she wished she didn't get caught up in the medical bureaucracy and that she would have been with them more. And I just took that to heart. And whenever I had a moment with them, they taught me, and their disease taught me, like, nothing matters. Everything can be forgiven. And what's really important, and just how to be with them. And when I wasn't with them, then I was messy. Then I was crying. Then I'd be in my car yelling or screaming that this isn't fair. And, then I would be dealing with medical bureaucracy. But I never let that come into those sacred moments that we had, because I didn't know how long they were going to be here mentally, because I was losing them that way. And then even in the last 10 months with my mom, like August 9th is 1 year. And I call it an angelversary.
Love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And your brother's angelversary is coming up in the
Yeah.
same, I think, a week after my mom too.
Yeah. August 16th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
And
these are big years.
yeah. And it's challenging because you go through so many firsts that year. I don't know if you experience that each time, but it's like it hits you. And I can't say how it is year after year because we're still in our first year, but
Yeah.
can you, like, talk on that? Like, what's the experience of, like, working through grief in some of those really, really challenging moments that, like, they were always there for?
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, let's backtrack to the year
Yeah.
of firsts.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's like every month is something, some holiday or another celebration of another family member. And every one of those is just another one that just, like, literally, it's almost like a sucker punch. And then I do mark every month right now in the first year that she's gone.
Mhm.
And now that my dad's 7 years, there's a certain, his birthday, Father's Day, oh my gosh, the day we spread his ashes and the day that he died. Those are now the main ones. I don't mark the months, but with mom in her first year, I mark all the months. And when we're doing that, sometimes I'm wondering, like, why am I really emotional, or why am I angry, or why am I easily frustrated? And then I actually go look at the calendar and I'm like, oh, okay, it's coming up. And I think those are the things, like, when that's coming up, like, there are moments we forget because normalcy comes in. Thank God for normalcy, because we just go on, and then it's not that we've forgotten, but we're just giving our mind and body a break.
Yeah.
And then when, what I call that grief burst, when that comes in, um, I'm now so It sounds so funny to say I'm so well versed in a grief burst now that I don't run away from them or try to stuff them, because I've actually learned that that grief burst is coming up because my body is like, hey, you got some really bad pain that has to come out right now. And I'm sorry, the timing's bad, but it has to come out now.
Yeah.
And most of it comes out in public, right? I'm sure you experience that as
Yeah.
well. Like the
For,
worst, I mean, ever.
yeah. For someone who maybe isn't familiar with the term grief burst, can you
Yeah,
just describe it? And then, yeah, I
absolutely.
definitely want to get
Yeah.
into that because it's
Absolutely.
absolutely.
A grief burst is literally you can be doing your normal life, your normal everyday things, and all of a sudden you are absolutely overcome with emotions. I
Mhm.
literally call like it's a storm squall that's come through, and it's just like opened up and flash. You are crying, you're completely overwhelmed, you feel gutted in that moment, and you're wondering, where the heck did this just come from?
Mhm.
And then it leaves almost as quickly as it came. I
Mhm.
find when I give it permission to come out, um, I actually have a little more energy and a little more clarity, and I have space.
Mhm.
And I also equate it to sometimes being like a pressure cooker. So
Mhm.
most of mine happen in the grocery store because I'm triggered by music from the 70s and 80s, which take me back to my childhood and memories with my parents.
Mhm.
And I'm just going to share briefly. The other day, I was out for my morning walk, and it was 2 days after my mom's 11-month anniversary, and I was really missing her.
Mhm.
And there's this elderly lady. I'm like, well, isn't that funny? You kind of look like my mom.
Mhm.
And she had a little black schnauzer, which was the dog that my mom had.
Oh.
And I was just like, oh, this is a message for mom. And I was walking past this woman, and I'm awfully a chatty person. So I'm like, oh, your dog is so sweet. Can I say hi? And
Mhm.
I didn't expect this, but the minute I start petting her dog, I start crying.
Oh.
And I told the woman, I said, I'm sorry, I'm crying right now. I'm sorry and not sorry. I'm just really overwhelmed because I'm missing my mom right now. And your dog is reminding me of my mom's dog. And this woman just was so lovely. And it was like spirit moved through her to give her, she goes, well, I lost my mom a decade ago, and I know how hard it is.
Oh my gosh.
And she was right there. And we just had this beautiful moment of just sharing our mutual losses of the loss of our mom.
Oh my gosh, that's
And
beautiful.
she said to me, she goes, it doesn't get easier. And I'm like, no, I know it doesn't get easier, but the
Mhm.
space in between gets bigger.
Mhm.
And the grief bursts, I find they come more like holidays, birthdays. And
Mhm.
then I've just reached a point where I'm just like, this just going to happen. So it's
Mhm.
part of the repertoire, but I allow myself to feel them,
Mhm. Yeah.
and I allow myself to also feel the joy of the moment if it's the celebration, like
Mhm.
Christmas, or, if it's my birthday, like, it was my first birthday without my mom. Well, I'm still allowed to enjoy my birthday. So I just really learned that when grief burst started, I was so embarrassed.
Mhm.
I can't count how many grocery carts I actually abandoned in the grocery store, and
Mhm.
I would like run to my car, and I would either leave and try again another day, or I would come back after I cried and then go get another cart and start all over again.
Yeah.
Now I just cry in the grocery store and just keep pushing my cart, and I don't care. And it's
Mhm.
not that I don't care per se. It's like I'm honoring myself. I'm not, what I mean when I say I don't care is I'm not worried about what other people are thinking about me anymore. And
Mhm.
I've actually learned that when I actually walk past people, some people like literally scatter, right? They're like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And then
Mhm.
there's a few people who just like still do their own thing and don't matter. And some, kind of like lean in a little bit. And I'm like, I'm just having a grief burst.
Mhm.
I lost my mom, or whether it's over my dog or in the pet store, I'll have them in the pet
Mhm.
store, right?
Mhm.
And I'm like, the people who've lost, this is what I have found. They lean in.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I know before I had such and so many griefs like I've had in the last decade, I thought I knew grief, but I knew grief in my own way, but also I want to equate it to almost like a textbook way or a societal way. And it wasn't until I've actually really been in it and know the depth of the pain that now when someone tells me that they've had a loss, do
Mhm.
I ever lean in? And I don't even have to say a word. Sometimes I just hold their hand or just look at them in the eye and go, I'm I'm so sorry. You're
Mhm.
here as well, feeling this pain.
Mhm.
I'm
Yeah.
sure you've experienced that as
Oh,
well.
absolutely. I know we talked about this because it's so true. Like I did not understand how deep it went until I went through such a significant loss in my life. And same thing, like, I would offer condolences and support to people who lost, but like I had no idea like what they were going through, like of course I knew they were sad, but I'm like, oh my gosh, your every single day is going to be impacted by this. Like you're going to go through so many stages of it. There's going to be so many things that you wish you had said and wish you had done. And
Oh,
like, there's just so many levels of that and like the weight of it. I mean,
mhm.
especially early on, like I had no idea how intense it felt like where you just feel like I remember early on, like I'm like, this is not reality. Like I woke up every morning just thinking like that was a bad dream. And then when I would realize it was reality, it would just come smacking at me again.
Yeah.
And it's like those moments that like you don't see or hear necessarily from people. It's like those are the moments that you're like, I have so much empathy now for people who've gone through it because like there is just a deep knowing of like you are really going through something significant here. And I think the hard part, and you touched on it earlier, and it really just stuck out to me, is that we're going through grief, but the world doesn't stop.
No.
We still have to function. You still have to be productive. You still have to show up every day. I mean, while you're going through such a internal battle of just trying to like survive almost through the deep grief that, but yet you have to be present in life. And it's such a struggle sometimes to show up. And I love how you share how vulnerable you are, in the grocery store and like just sharing that because I think sometimes we feel like we have to have it all together. We have to keep it all
Yes.
together. And I think that pressure we have often puts so much on people who are going through things in their life. And so I love that your vulnerability, just like your story of connecting with that woman in the park, like that's what it's about. I think if we can all just share some vulnerability and take down the mask and realize like every single one of us is going through something. And now here you just connected with somebody that like, I'm sure she got a lot from that too. And now here you are
Totally.
helping
Yeah.
each other heal in that moment. And
Yeah.
it's like, I think that's what it's about, just making these connections of like, I understand, I see you. And you said that earlier. That
Yeah.
means everything.
Well, we,
Everything.
we we want to be seen. We want to be heard. We
Mhm.
we want our pain witnessed. And I didn't realize, like, I mean, I knew I was pretty much a pressure cooker that morning. I felt really, like full up.
Mhm.
And I realized, like, oh, here's the grief burst. I'm almost grateful for them
Mhm.
because I now had space and I could literally feel my body start to relax. But
Mhm.
there's another thing I want to comment on um, that you were talking about. Like, it's so, I want to use the word grief is debilitating.
Mhm.
There are days I just wanted to lay in bed. I didn't want to get up. I didn't know how to get up, let alone have a shower. That when my grief was at its worst, particularly because I had three major losses in a 4 year span, and I literally wrote a sticky note: brush teeth, shower, eat,
Mhm.
see if you can go for a walk. And if I did one of those, I
Mhm.
had a good day.
Mhm.
And then I could start to add more. And I had sticky notes like, what's my morning routine? What's my bedtime routine? And I had to write them out and then I could like tick them, like it's kind of like the atomic habits, right? I
Mhm.
had to make life survival atomic habits because I was in such deep grief that I couldn't think of even the basic things. So That's what I want to share. Like, it does go to that level. And then I also want to touch on when you say, like, you feel like there's the mask. I'm like, oh my gosh, yes. But how else can we teach people to do grief differently? Is if we don't allow ourselves to be vulnerable in public, we can't teach the public how to have a different view. If they're uncomfortable, like, yes, in a grocery store, people will scurry. Well, great, then I have the whole aisle to myself. That's okay, right? But that's okay. They haven't had the loss. But we actually end up having 2 or 3 or 4 faces. We come home and it's the mortal, I want to call it literally, because it's the mortally wounded grief. Sometimes you can't function at home because it's so bad, because you finally get to come down from trying to hide it or block it from everyone else. And then you have the let's armor up because we got to go out in the world. Let's hope I can function at work and do my best. Let's hope someone can understand that I don't have the full brain capacity to think like I did because my brain and heart and body are shattered by my loss. Let's hope someone can have empathy for me.
Yeah.
Especially at the office or in a working situation. And if you have someone who is your I don't know what the right word is, boss or leader or manager who's empathic, or a coworker who's empathic, and you can share this, it's a plus if there's someone else who's lost someone. But if you can just share, like, hey, I'm doing the best that I can with grief, because really the first year, it's kind of a write-off. The second year, here's the shocker. Early grief is 2 years. This is, I took my training with David Kessler to become a grief educator and a grief specialist. And he goes, early grief is 2 years. Grief doesn't need, in my opinion, does not need to be a medicated condition that we need medicine for, especially after 6 months. 6 months is nothing. 2 years is early grief. The first year, we're kind of in a daze of firsts. The second year, it actually can hit us even harder. And why? Because now we're in this is real. They're not coming back. They can't come back. And it's like, oh, wow. And also you're like, this is now the second birthday, anniversary, special day, special memory that I'm going to live without them. One of the best things that ever happened to me, her name was Jackie. I don't even know her last name. And I was in the equivalent of like not a Ronald McDonald house, but something like that for family members. And my father was in the hospital, and we didn't know if he was going to make it at that time. And that was a place that I could stay because I was out of province. And this one elderly woman who had walked her family members, she was the last surviving sibling of her family, and now she was losing her husband. And I would just crawl into her arms literally and cry regularly. And she was that mother figure that I needed in that moment. And then she said to me, I want you to know, and this is true, I have seen it. When they're gone, it's going to hurt. You will grieve them for the rest of the life that you are alive, and you will miss them for the rest of the life that you are alive. But she says there is still a gift that they send you from the other side, and you will be gifted throughout the remainder of your life as well. So it's hurts, but there's gifts, and then the love and the grief are going to merge together. And I got to know my dad, especially more so after he died, because some random I contacted Finland to let them know of his death, and so they notified classmates somehow, and one classmate from the 1950s was alive, got my email, tracked my aunt down in Finland, got my email, sent me an email, and started telling me stories about my father as a teenager that I never knew. And I'm like, I believe in angels, miracles, source, divine, God. How else are these messages coming to me? And they would just make me laugh and cry at the same time. And here I am still learning more about him after the fact. And he
Mhm.
sent me photos and yearbooks from
Mm.
my dad. And I'm like, how does that happen?
Mhm. Yeah.
And I've just witnessed, like in my own work, um, like, so I work with animals and people, who are walking the end of life journey with their pets. I see how animals try to get messages through to
Mm.
their people. And I'm pretty sure that that day that that woman and that dog was divinely orchestrated by mom. And
Mhm.
I've had several occasions, like I literally, there's a cemetery nearby, and not that mom's buried there, but I go there because that's where I can cry.
Mhm.
I actually go to a cemetery and I sit on a park bench because that's where I can cry, because that's where it's expected.
Mhm.
And I just get to be by myself. And that's where I actually go talk to my mom.
Mhm.
And I ask for her help. Within 24 hours, I have an answer delivered through another human being
Mhm.
with the words that I just needed to hear.
Yeah.
And that's what keeps giving me peace. And our spiritual relationship just keeps growing.
Yeah.
You had experienced messages from your brother?
I have. Yeah, I've had quite a few things like just come through, and my brother was like, he was really into big in computers, and like he write software and all kinds of
Oh,
things, and he was always like my go-to person for anything I needed with a computer. And like, so anytime I'm stuck and I'm just like, Sean, can you help me? It's like
yes.
literally within 5 minutes, I'm like, it's like it just comes to me, and I'm like, oh, and it's like it just gets easy. And so I like ask him, and it's like I get that. But yeah, I've had like experiences happen, and I'm just like, I know that's him, like
Yeah.
it's I just know, like I've had messages like come through. I've had like books like that would be like put in my path,
Yes.
and I'm like, that I know that's what I need to read. And it was exactly what I needed to hear in that moment. And it's
Mhm.
just like, I just know, I completely agree. Is like everything is orchestrated.
Yeah.
And there's so many things that have happened this past year. It's like when I'm hitting that like low spot, it's like there's always something that picks me up in that moment. And I'm just like, thank you. Like that's what I needed. And um, right after he had passed, I was walking and there's this waterfall on our road, and there was this red-tailed hawk that was sitting right in the middle of the waterfall. My brother always loved waterfalls, and it was just sitting there, and I was like, man, I was just taking a walk because I was having a hard time then. I just took a picture of it, and there's this like white like rainbow through the whole picture on my phone. And I'm
Oh.
just like, I just like you just had
Mhm.
that film, like I know that's him. And now like I
Mhm.
keep seeing red-tailed hawks like showing up everywhere. It's like I just know. And so like, yeah, it's like those messages of like, I know he's here with me. Like I can feel it. Like, I'll have something just pop in my head, and it's like memories are coming back that I haven't thought about in a long time. And it's just like those
Yeah.
things. It's like yeah, there's just like a knowing. It's hard to even explain, but
Yes.
it's like a knowing that they're
Yeah.
there with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an absolute knowing. And I just want to ask you, when you get those memories that you haven't thought of for a while, because they're
Mhm.
being, planted for you
Mhm.
to be reminded of,
Yeah.
how is your heart in that moment?
It just makes me feel like, like I said, I always looked up to him, and it's just like those little moments that I'm like, just like simple little moments from like growing up and stuff like that. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, that was nice, like it's just, yeah, because it's like when you become adults, you're always so busy, and we were always like, doing our thing. Then it's like brought me back to those like maybe slower times where you're like could really just be with each other. And it's like, yeah, it's really, really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just you sharing that just reminds me of the other day. I was working with a family, and they had lost their dog.
Mhm.
And they were wondering how to explain this to their child, and I basically ended up explaining to them, and I think this really goes for all children, who've lost their parents, particularly the younger ones.
Mhm.
Um, I said to to ask them, "What's your favorite memory?" And ask for the favorite memory.
Mm.
And kids are so great because they're so honest and so connected still that they can actually feel them. So when your kids are actually saying like, "Oh, hey, grandma says this," or, dad said this, or, "Oh, I think I see dad," like, in my opinion, they're that connected.
Mhm.
But also, I'm going back to asking the kids, like, to share their favorite memory and make a story and ask them what did they like about it. But then really to get them connect to their body and ask them, how does that memory make your heart feel?
Mhm. Yeah.
And when you watch a child start to explain the love and the memory and the feeling of their heart, then that's when you say, and now you've connected to, you know, the dog or to your dad or to your mom. And this is how you still get to connect and be with them.
Mhm.
It's when your heart swells up in love. That's when they're sending you the love.
I love that. I love that. That's such a beautiful practice for so many people going through that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And something I'll take with me just to remind yourself of like there are still things you can do to actively connect with them.
Yeah.
And
And
yeah.
really, they should still be actively a part
Hmm.
of our life. And because how else will you teach your children about your brother other than to continue those stories alive and continue to have them there? Like I lived in Japan, and I've traveled through Thailand and the Philippines, and I'm originally from Finland, and I've just noticed that so many different cultures have different ways of how we want to honor our ancestors. Like look
Hmm.
at Mexico and the Day of the Dead, right? Um, in I can't remember what it was called in Japan, but it's in August where they have an honoring of the relatives. And in Finland, like at Christmas time, we go and we light candles on the tombstones in the cemetery. So the cemetery is all candle lit. It's so
Wow.
beautiful at night because it's so dark.
Hmm.
Um, but we include them.
Hmm.
So they're never not with us as we move forward. And I have found, being raised in Canada and, a lot of my friends in the States,
Hmm.
we it's almost like we have to forget them or not talk about them. And I'm like, no, we actually need to include them.
Hmm.
This is how we keep their stories alive. And, some people still set plates for them or have, certain altars or shrines set up for them because I think it's important that we remember them because they, like in regards to being my parents, well, they brought me here. I wouldn't be here without them. So why not thank them? And I've seen people like at weddings, they have special chairs with the portrait, of family members who aren't with them anymore because they're there, or they're holding the portrait, or they're holding the ashes or the urn in the wedding photos. Like, hey, this is mom or dad, or my brother or sister. Um, but we're still keeping them apart, and I think when we can still keep them a part of our present day and our family, um, I think we all keep growing. And we actually help our kids know that death isn't something to actually be afraid of. Like I grew up being extremely afraid.
Yeah. Hmm.
And when my grandmother was dying, it was actually my aunt
Hmm.
who showed me, oh, we can actually do the end of life differently. And I was there every day for the last 4 weeks of my grandmother's life, helping to care for her while she was in hospice. And my aunt was the one who took me to the funeral home. Like we did everything. And my aunt's like, someone, she said, has to prepare you for when the time is that it's either me or your mother.
Hmm.
I'm so grateful. As hard as that was, I'm so grateful that she lovingly led me through all the steps that I then knew what to do when it was my dad. And
Mhm.
then I also knew what kind of questions to ask.
Mhm.
And then I got to walk with my stepdad, my journey with my mom. And
Mhm.
we got to discuss and have the difficult conversations. And I think I don't know how we lose the fear about it, but I
Mhm.
think the more of us who have lost are in grief will live with our grief. Like we get through it, but you never get over it. You get through it to learn to walk with it. And it joins, I always say, grief now joins your emotional repertoire.
Mhm. Yeah.
And it's a complicated, like I say, it's a complicated bouquet, you
Mhm.
know, like it's like a
It,
wine, like it really is. It's so
mhm.
complex.
It is.
And we're always discovering it. And every loss that we ever have before or after,
Mhm.
it's still going to open up doors to be different again
Mhm.
because every relationship is different. And we're going to feel every grief
Yeah.
differently.
Mhm. Yeah. I love how you just said it joins the repertoire because that's so true. Like I've had that
Mhm.
experience and just you talking about like sharing it, like I have a 5-year-old son and that was a really hard thing to explain to him because him and his uncle were very, my brother and him were very close. And so like we have, just like you were saying, we've kept him in the conversation. Like, we talk about like he has a ball pit that my brother got him. And he's like, I'm like, we'll always say like, oh, that's Uncle Sean's, he got you that. And he's like, I know. And his birthstone was amethyst. So every time he sees an amethyst, he's like, oh, it's Uncle Sean. So like, he's just,
Lovely.
yeah. So he keeps like, and he'll draw pictures and he'd be like, oh, I drew this for Uncle Sean. And so he's actively keeping him in his memory. And like, I love that because I never want him to forget. I want
Yeah.
him to know who he was. And as he grows, I can tell him more stories of who he was. And so it's been healing for me because as you're saying, like grief is that added emotion. I was struggling with how do I show up and be present and joyful with my kids that are, 5 and 2 almost. And yet also reality is I'm in a really hard emotional place right now of dealing with grief. It becomes this like a paradigm of like, how do
Yep.
we navigate all this? And yeah, and like when you talk about it's like that complicated bouquet, that's exactly what it is. Like you're experiencing all those other like higher emotions, but the grief is always part of it. And
Yep.
so that's been a big learning curve for me to be like, oh, it's just always there, and yeah, I think
And it's how does it settle in us?
yeah.
And here's the thing, like this is like this has been so poignant after mom's death for me is wow, we carry grief and every other emotion.
Mhm.
Whichever prime one is like, are we super happy? Are we angry? Are we sad? Are we being mindful? Like whatever it is. And then I'm like, are we in love? Are we, just feel so much love in that moment? But the grief is right there beside it. And I'm like, oh, yeah. So those of us who've now lost, our heart, I always feel is like shutter doors and just got ripped open and
Mhm.
it's been mending. But and the scar is there. And the scars will always be there.
Mhm.
But our heart is, I'm learning, is big enough to hold all the emotions.
Mhm.
And with grief, we just get to be with it and we can hold love at the same time
Mhm.
and we can be happy at the same time.
Mhm.
That's the mind-blowing concept, I think. It's
Yeah.
like how, and then this I'm like, oh, this is the true definition of the word bittersweet. Or I usually rephrase it as I feel broken and
Mhm.
I feel built at the same time.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
I'm shattered and yet I'm whole.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's this complete opposite
Mhm.
simultaneously existing together
Yeah. Yeah.
that we now hold and walk through. And
Mhm.
I didn't understand. I mean, I understood it, but you know, this loss the most, and now, both parents gone, just really has clarified that feeling for me even more. So a lot of people feel guilty,
Mm-hmm.
they feel happy. A lot of people feel afraid. What if I forget?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm like, I know I I did take some videos of mom so I could still hear her voice. I have some videos of dad so I can hear his voice, but I have no videos of when they were without their disease.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's hard. Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
I still hear their voice when I want to hear it and go back and listen,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't have them before their disease. But their disease came, and as weird as this is going to sound, it was the richest time in both our relationships, because when you have a loved one losing their memory to a dementia or an Alzheimer's,
Mm-hmm.
those moments are so precious. I'm the one who gets to keep the present day memory.
Mm-hmm.
They don't.
Yeah.
There again, I'm filled with joy that I have that memory, and I'm also filled with sadness that they don't remember, because 5 minutes later, it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm learning about presence is that's exactly all we have, is like this moment you and I are having this conversation. We have this in this moment. And then when the podcast is done,
Mm-hmm.
now it turns into a memory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, I feel like we almost need to be reminded of that over and over and over again. It's like, I'm sure going through that, it becomes that like reminder of like how finite that present moment is when you have it, and how finite things are in life, and that everything is ever changing and we're not promised anything. And it's like, yeah. And it's like to live in that and like realize that like here, if we're not, that's only where we can feel some kind of sense of peace, is that present moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I used to live in the country, and now I live in the city. And I really miss the trees in the forest.
Mhm.
So there's a really beautiful cemetery not
Mhm.
far from where I live. I walk there almost every morning. It's very healing. Some people would think, oh my gosh, that sounds so weird or corny. It's very peaceful. It's very
Mhm.
peaceful. The trees are lovely. And I read the tombstones, the dates, and I wonder their stories. And I'm like, oh, they died young. Oh, they were really old. And there's a gamut really of 0 to 101 that I have discovered in the cemetery. And I'm always wondering, like, and then what? And then we're gone. And then we have a little memorial, and then we're not here. So
Mhm.
how how do I want to show up?
Mhm.
How do I want to show up for who's still here? How do I want to show up for myself? How do I want to show up for my life?
Mhm.
And also, how do I still want to keep them in my life and remember them?
Mhm. Yeah. It's and I think that's like it's almost like becomes this, like I don't know if you felt like this after you lost your parents, but it's like you just understand how finite life is, and
Yes.
you understand that there
Yes.
is no like one day anymore. It's like you do it now,
Yep.
because you can see that that time, I mean, it literally passes, and you don't know when your day is.
Yep.
And it's that you talked about the gifts in the beginning, that felt like such a gift in that loss, because I realized that like you make things happen now. You live your life purpose now. You choose yourself now. You love yourself now. It's like all those things, like you have to do this now. Like
Yep.
you got to figure out what's your lesson here.
Well, because they say like we're not promised tomorrow, and
Mhm.
the bubble is now broken.
Mhm.
And they're not coming back.
Mhm.
And like I usually have a picture of my mom and stepdad right here at my desk. And, like I'm just gonna show you like this is mom. This is mom right now. And this is what I have of mom and the photos and the videos.
Mhm.
And I was, I helped my stepdad with some of the stuff that he's going through and cleaning up the accounts and taxes and all that. And every time one of those is completed, or you have to remove their name,
Mhm.
or now the taxes are done, I literally sit here and just like try to catch my breath going like you're vanishing. I want you back. And then I'm just realizing I'm like, you are gone from this plane and you are not coming back.
Mhm.
And I'm still need something literally to hang on to. Like you'd mentioned before we started the podcast, your necklace,
Yeah, I think it's for anyone looking. Yeah. Hmm.
and like we still need those tangible things.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
think when they're gone and they can't come back, I think this is why it's even more important to keep the stories alive, because here's the potential. I heard somewhere, I think it was an Instagram story someone had posted, like we're only remembered for 2 generations. And
Mhm.
if I think about it in my life, I'm like, oh yeah, that will be about true. Um, but you continuously telling stories to your kids, they get to learn Sean through you. And as they grow up, you're going to keep getting gifted from Sean with memories to be able to share with them that Sean is actually still he's actually participating in the raising of the kids.
Mhm. Yeah.
And then they get to share stories. Oh, yeah, my uncle used to do this. Isn't this funny?
Yeah, thank you for saying that. Because like I feel like it just hit me. I'm like, oh my gosh, because that was like one of the things that felt like such a loss because my brother was such an incredible person and like he was the person that like knew everything about everything. And I'm like, oh, he will teach them so much. And so that felt like such an incredible loss because I'm like, I wanted my sons to learn from him.
Yes.
So for you saying that, thank you, because that really made me realize like he still can be that person for
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have goosebumps right now just thinking
Mhm.
about that. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
And you get to be the storyteller.
Hmm. Yeah. It's it's so impactful to really like that's that energy, because we're all energy. And it's like, as you're saying that, it's like when we share their story, their life, like it's their energy is still here. And it's, I always tell my son, because he asks a lot of questions like, why does Sean have to go to heaven? And so that's
Yeah.
really challenging. And like, is he coming back? And like all these questions I have to answer. And it's like, we always tell him, it's like, he's still here with you. You just have to talk to him. And like, and
Yeah.
it was really cool because the other day my son was trying to think of this dinosaur name, and him and my brother were always like they were gonna have this like dinosaur competition who could name more. And unfortunately he passed before he could do that. But it was really cool because he was trying to think of this dinosaur, and I'm like, well, Ash, oh, he's like, can you ask Sean? He asked me that, and so I like asked Sean, I'm like, what's this dinosaur? And he like described and everything. I'm like, I don't know what this dinosaur is. And then like 5 minutes later, my son's like face lit up, and he's like, Utah Raptor, and I'm like, oh my gosh, see, like Sean gave it to you, buddy. Like he knew,
Yep. Yep.
So it was
Yep.
just like you could see like the energy just come through him.
Yes.
Like it was just this like shot of clarity. And it's
Yep.
like
Yeah.
it's like feels magical when that happens.
It does. It does.
Mhm.
It really does. Like that's the hit that I get like with either of my parents. That's the hit that I get like so with my soul dog that passed. He
Mhm.
literally sends me he was 100-pound Rottweiler, right? 100-pound Rottweiler, and he sends me one dandelion fluff. Just one, and it floats in the air, or he sends me a fluff, but it's just the tiniest little fluff. And it's so funny, I found a photo of him, of a puppy photo, and there's a photo of him as an 8-week-old puppy with one dandelion fluff on his nose,
Oh
and
my
I just
God.
burst out laughing.
Oh
I
my
have a black cat, and he comes in the house every once in a while with just one fluff on him, and I'm like, oh my God, you have such a sense of humor. Like I have
God.
found our loved ones, be they animals or humans on the other side, they have they have to get really creative to get messages to us.
Yeah.
And they're really funny.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I found like in so many moments when I was really missing my dad would always send a black raven, but the black raven would be like the hugest raven you'd ever seen. And in the most obvious places that it would just make me laugh. Like one, I was taking my car in for a service. A black raven flew in front of the service shop door and slowly waddled its way
Oh,
across that I couldn't open the door.
oh
And
my
I
God.
had the biggest belly laugh going, Dad, you have the most incredible sense of humor.
Oh,
And
that's awesome.
but that was just that shift, like, you with the red-tailed hawk and, when you look in photos that you take and you see these orbs or rainbows in there, like those are them also coming in and visiting. Like messages happen. I know a lot of people say like, oh, I don't get messages. But when our pain and grief is so bad, I didn't get messages in the beginning. I couldn't
Hmm.
because I had an wall behind my heart protecting it because it hurts so much.
Hmm.
And like for example, it's 3 years now that my dog died. Um, I had my first dream about him just recently. And all I saw before was the dandelion signs, but now I can feel him more versus just see the signs.
Hmm.
And I know this is one thing actually I really want to share. Our grief will come up to be healed when we are ready and safe. So I want to share a story of my friend's mother-in-law. She was in the midst of raising two teenage sons when her husband died, and she'd never worked, and she needed to find a job because there was nothing to support the family and try to manage two teenage boys and all the grief that it was only when she retired did she finally tap into her grief, and she was shocked that there's something called time delayed grief. So I've experienced it. Like I had a horse when I was 17, and the pain was excruciating for what I witnessed and went through. That it wasn't until my first dog as an adult died in my 30s that I also now started grieving my horse. And then when I started learning about like animal communication and grief and going into the line of work that I do now, I had another healing that I could open up my heart to my horse. And there's that saying, like, does time heal all wounds? And I would say, in incremental levels, when you are ready, it will come up for healing. And often it's in those moments that you feel safe and ready, then your grief comes up for healing. And it's not always just in that moment. Like so many people in society think that, oh, okay, they've died. Now you've prepared for the funeral. You've cried for that week. You're back at work in a week to 2 weeks. You're over it. Now just get on with life. And I'm like, it hasn't even hit us. We're in shock.
You're so right. And it's like, yeah, that the societal's expectation of like in a certain amount of time you should be over that and moved on. And that's just not the reality of it.
That's not even true.
No, no,
You don't
no,
move on. You
never
move
do.
with it.
Yes.
You move through it to be with it.
And it's
And
with
you
you.
never get over it. You carry it.
Yeah, 100%. And I think just having conversations like this is that's why it's so important, because if you're going through grief and you don't know that this is normal, that it can come up years later, or
Yes,
that you're still feeling it after 5, 6, 7 years, like
that's
that's
normal.
very normal, because the last thing you want to do is shame yourself after experience grief,
Yeah.
because that's only going to keep you in a stuck place. If you're shaming yourself for still having these intense emotions, like knowing that's normal and your system and everything is just going through it, and just you talking about being safe, like
Mhm.
I hope for anyone who's listening is maybe going through grief is like, oh my gosh, maybe like I hope it lets you take a breath and
And
realize
and
like,
have permission to be
yes,
okay in it. And
yeah,
please please give yourself permission to be messy,
Yeah.
because this is hard.
hmm
And however many, this is the other thing I want to share, is how many years they were in your life. That matters. But what was the depth of
hmm
your relationship? Was your relationship complicated?
hmm
Because we can have complicated and challenging relationships with loved ones. That makes their grief complicated and challenging and difficult. And sometimes we're so angry we don't even want to grieve. And anger is another way of expressing our tears.
hmm
Like some people just, they blow up. That is how they deal with their grief.
hmm
They're not wrong. And everyone has their own way that's unique to them and their relationship.
hmm
Like there is no cookie cutter, do grief this way. Like
hmm
grief is not linear. Like, yes, there's the six, you know, well, David Kessler calls it, like there's the six, I don't know what you want to call it, the steps or the protocol for it. But it's not that you go through, oh, one to the next, to the next, to the next. It's, um, okay, I'm in denial. Oh, I'm really angry. Oh, I can accept it. Oh, but I'm back here again, because it depends. Is it an anniversary? How am I feeling that day? Am I upset over something else? Am I sensitive over this? And we just oscillate between all of those
hmm
aspects of
Yeah.
grief all the time. And
hmm
if we know we do that all the time, I think we can give ourselves grace, because society is not going to give us grace.
hmm
We have to give ourselves grace.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love that.
There's one last thing I want to say, because
Mhm.
this happens so often when we share our grief and people say, like, well, just get over it, or, for example, if it's an animal, it's just a dog, or, or like, aren't they're in a better place now? Like, these are not helpful. They're not helpful at all. And another part that's really hard when we're in grief is we have those things coming at us from people who in their mind
Mhm.
believe they are saying something supportive and helpful.
Mhm.
I am guilty of being that person. And I was that person before I had a loss.
Mhm.
I was that insensitive before I had a loss without knowing I was insensitive. I thought well, society tells us these are the things we should say. They're in a better place, for example. And then when I'm on the side who's now lost, I'm like, well, no, I want them here with me. This isn't a better place. Don't tell me they're in a better place. I couldn't understand how wrong that statement was when I said it before loss.
Mhm.
I understand how wrong it is now with loss. So that's
Mhm.
the other thing I think grievers that we carry is, you try to find someone that you can share this with, and you're met with insensitivity, and it just makes you anger or feel more alone.
Mhm. Yeah.
That we almost have to like dig even deeper in ourselves and in our pain and go, wow. For me, I would say in my head, I'm really jealous that you haven't lost anyone yet.
Mhm.
I wish I was still in your shoes.
Mhm.
I wish I could still be on that side where I hadn't lost yet.
Mhm. Yeah. To know that.
And I'm grateful that you still have that innocence that I don't have anymore. And I want it, but I can't.
Mhm. Yeah. I.
And they
Yeah.
purposely don't mean to hurt us.
Mhm.
They just haven't experienced it yet.
Yep.
So
Mhm.
then if we can see it that way, we don't take it as
Mhm.
personally,
Yeah.
but also we're being asked more of
Mhm.
ourselves when we're in that grief. And that's the frustrating part.
Yeah. 100%. You're so right. And it's like so relatable because like for so long, I mean, even now, it's like to go into a social atmosphere is really challenging. And like I feel very challenged by that
Yep.
because I think the hardest question I can be asked is, how are you?
Mhm.
Because there's two answers. Like you
Mhm.
want to say, oh, I'm fine, but like the reality of it is like I'm not fine. I'm going through this, this, and this, and this. So
Mhm.
like for me, I don't know if you've experienced this, it's like that it feels like very inauthentic, you know, like in on one side you feel like you should just say fine because you're not trying to pull the mood down. You just want to like, you know, let's just have a nice conversation. But in reality, if you're being true, you are feeling a
Mhm.
lot and you're experiencing grief and it's been a challenging time and you want to like say that to be authentic. Like, how have you navigated that? Because I find that so challenging to like keep the vibe in the place and not pull someone into your grief, but also be authentic with yourself.
Yes. I've handled it both ways
Hmm.
because in those moments, I often carry a hand on my heart.
Hmm.
I often carry a hand on my heart.
Hmm.
So in some of those moments, I'm like, oh, okay. Is this a moment? And is this a person
Hmm.
that I can actually share this with?
Hmm.
Is this person going to be able to hold space, lean in, acknowledge, see me? We don't need to go into a huge conversation. It's just like I'm having a grief day. I actually say so. I say these things. I'm having a grief burst. I'm having a grief moment. I'm having a sad moment. I'm really struggling right now, but I'm doing my best to be here. So those are some of the answers.
Hmm.
And then other times I'm like, hmm, no, that's just going to open up a can of worms, literally. And do I have the wherewithal to be in it? And sometimes that's just like, okay, pull out the mask and go, yep, I'm fine. Or then I'll try to deflect or, depending what it is, leave the conversation. But here's the thing. We don't pull someone into our grief.
Hmm.
And maybe sometimes if we did authentically share, people could just simply go, wow, I'm sorry you're having a hard time today. Like some of those questions that we actually need is rephrasing. It's like, how are you doing today?
I love
How
that.
are you doing in this moment? Oh my gosh, right now, this is a great moment. Or this is a really hard moment. Or I can't even answer that question because I'm going to be a puddle.
Yeah.
Can you tell? And I've actually said, can you tell me a joke right now? And literally, I've had someone just tenderly ask me, how are you?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I'm a bucket.
Yeah.
Absolute. There's a grief burst right there because
Yeah.
someone at that moment. And sometimes I can welcome a hug. And
Hmm.
other times I'm like, can we just
Hmm.
have space? Because if you touch me right now, I am not in a
Hmm.
place that I want to be this emotional right now.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
I'm really finding who my friends are.
Hmm. Yeah.
I'm discovering new friends.
Hmm.
And I'm discovering like when we can have a grief community or find others who've had loss
Hmm.
and they ask us about the people we've lost to
Hmm.
tell us stories about them, like we
Hmm.
get to learn about them,
Hmm.
but they also want to share things.
Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. I love that. Like, thank you for sharing that because it's like, I think these are some things like, you know, before I experienced such deep grief, like I wouldn't know how to approach that. And I think if someone's listening and like maybe you haven't experienced that deep grief, like this is just another way you can approach someone if they are sharing that and they are being vulnerable. So it just gives us these like tools to like honor people where they're at.
Yeah.
And I love that because again, in that moment when you shared that in this moment, it feels just so much more like receptive versus like how are you blanket statement, which is like feels like the biggest loaded question you could ever
Yes.
ask somebody when you're experiencing grief. How am I? Well, I could give you seven different versions of that, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So
And
I
then
love
and then as
that.
a griever, you're like, where do I actually start?
Yeah.
Right? But if it's like, how are you in this moment?
Yeah.
How are you right now?
Yeah.
That actually helps the griever pinpoint to
Yeah.
become in touch with like, how am I right
Yeah.
now?
Yes. I love that. Just
And
three
and
simple
that
words onto it.
right
Yeah.
exactly. And that makes all the difference. And then here's the thing. we don't always have to have words. We can just have that compassionate look and just go, I see you.
Yeah.
Or we can do a touch on an arm or a shoulder, or ask, would this be the right time to give you a hug?
Mm-hmm.
So it's don't go in for a hug. It's actually ask them, are you okay? Like, may I hold your hand for a moment? Like, can I touch your shoulder?
Mm-hmm.
Are you open to a hug? Because there's days I'm very receptive to a hug, and other days I'm like, nope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because in that moment, I don't want to make time, or it's not the appropriate time for
Mm-hmm.
me to fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I personally, do a lot of falling apart by myself or in my walks, my morning walks.
Mm-hmm.
Those are kind of my time. My car, hmm,
Yeah.
my
Mm-hmm.
car is my everything.
Mm-hmm.
I did love living in the country more because I didn't feel as stared at in the city when I'm driving
Mm-hmm.
and driving. But then I'm like, no
Mm-hmm.
one knows me. It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
The, when we're vulnerable, this is how, as hard as it is, we become the changers in the world of changing how society views grief if
Mm-hmm.
we allow ourselves to have the mess show up. Because when we give the mess the opportunity to show up,
Mm-hmm.
we don't carry the pain. It's not stuffed.
Yeah.
This is what I teach like my clients all the time is the more you can let out in little incremental layers,
Mm-hmm.
you're relieving and releasing the pain so it doesn't stay in there. And
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
you then allow little incremental layers of space
Mm-hmm.
or love to come in, because I know when grief first happens, there's no freaking way you're going to believe that joy can ever come back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was 2 years less a day when I had a sensation of joy for my father's angelversary. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I never thought I'd feel that again.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And like with mom, it was probably at the 10 month mark.
Mm-hmm.
I had a glimpse of some joy. My
Mm-hmm.
work gives me joy,
Mm-hmm.
but in my personal life, I'm still trying to find my joy with my own personal losses.
Mm-hmm.
And just to have those little glimmers, it feels like it's lost. It feels like it will never come back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But one day it does. That length of time, it's not set,
Mm-hmm.
but it comes in, and it just like when you find yourself laughing, it catches you by surprise. You're like, oh my gosh, you hear yourself laughing again because you think when it happens, you're never gonna have joy or laugh again or be
Mm-hmm.
happy.
Yeah.
And it feels like that for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you feel guilty if you do,
Mm-hmm.
but you can still feel joy and happiness in the moments for the life that you're living in the present moment with your family.
Mm-hmm.
You're allowed to,
Mm-hmm.
and you're still allowed to hold grief.
Yeah. I love that. And as you were speaking, it just reminded me, I had a psychic medium on a few episodes ago, and I asked him this
Right.
question. It was Chris Lippincott, and I asked him this question. I was like, what is the biggest regret you hear from the other side about their life here? And he said the biggest regret he hears from people who've passed on is that they wish they enjoyed life more.
Yes.
And so that to me is like the biggest permission slip to experience joy, because you're literally getting it from people who've passed on. They want you to
Yes.
live your life. They want you to
Yes.
experience joy again. So it's like they don't want you to live out of guilt because you're experiencing joy. They want you to full out feel it. And like for me, when I heard that message, I was like, it's okay. It's okay to like let your guard down
Yes.
and feel it.
Yes.
So yeah.
It's giving ourselves permission because
Mhm.
like some people, a decade, okay? A decade of an end of life journey with both my parents.
Mm-hmm.
That's a long time.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm in a different place now after my mom than I was like after my dad died, because he was my first parent.
Mm-hmm.
But I also had so much closure with them. And
Mm-hmm.
I still had joyful moments with my mom, making new memories that I'm the one who gets to keep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's what carries me on. And I also know both my parents, no matter what, would love nothing more
Mm-hmm.
than for me to be happy. I have to work through my stuff to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the other thing that I've learned, like in my work with animals, and occasionally deceased family members come through in some of my sessions to share messages with people too. Not always, but once in a while. Um, you turn into love.
Mm-hmm.
There's no anger, there's no remorse, there's no sadness. They literally turn into a feeling of pure love. And when I talk to dogs and cats and other animals who've passed, they don't understand guilt. It's a man-made emotion that we've made.
Mm-hmm.
They don't understand guilt. And they always, when people are like, oh, will they forgive me? And they always say, well, there's nothing to forgive because they know everything that we ever did was from a place of love. So it's an unconditional love that our animals have for us here on earth,
Mm-hmm.
that I honestly believe this is their mission when they live with us, is to teach us to have the unconditional love for ourselves. Because when we can have it for ourselves, we become free
Mm-hmm.
because we're not carrying the burden. So, yes, we make mistakes. Yes, we say wrong things. Yes, we do wrong things. But can we still love ourselves in it? And can we love ourselves in our grief?
Mm-hmm.
And grief also makes us do crazy things
Mm-hmm.
because we're not of technically sound mind. We're of grief mind.
Mm-hmm.
And we're overwhelmed at the tiniest things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
it takes a while to, like, I almost want to say, rehabituate into the world. So for me, I have 3.5 years of a lot of losses besides my dog and my mom. And it's 3.5 years and actively working that every month since January, there's more and more joy coming into my personal life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But
Awesome.
that was the time span.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's coming because now, how am I going to choose to live my life and honor myself and bring them with me and keep honoring them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that. Like that whole unconditional, like just the last 5 minutes, I'm like, yes, like on repeat, like that. It's absolutely beautiful because it's just that message of like, I think you need to just hear it again and again, especially if you're going through grief. Like it's okay to love yourself in this moment, love yourself through the mistakes you make,
Yep.
just that this is what it's all about. It's that learning and just giving yourself grace. And it's just, those are all the messages I think we just need to be reminded of
Yep.
over and over and over again because it's so easy to get stuck in this place of like this is forever and I'm
Yes.
gonna live
Oh,
like this forever.
yes.
Yeah. So I
Yes.
appreciate you sharing all that because that's just like I feel like I need to like listen on that repeat again. Like it's just those messages of like hope and like feeling like there's more to this and we can love ourselves through it and
Yeah.
realize that we can live a different way.
Yeah.
So I love that.
Yeah.
Hannah, I feel like we could talk all day. Like
I
this has
think so
just been
too.
such like personally healing conversation, but like I just know there's just so much value in this. And this is something that, you know, anyone going through grief, I hope it just lightens that load just a little bit for you. And I know it will, everything you shared today. So I'm so grateful for you being here today.
Thank
And
you. Thank you for having me. I really
yeah.
hope it gives people an opportunity to shift their perspective and find the grace and tenderness for themselves.
Yeah.
And if you're supporting someone in loss, I hope it gives you just other ways to be there for them, because sometimes the power is just being present and just sitting beside them or doing things without always asking the questions of how are you? It's like, do you want to go bake bread or go for a walk or go to a ball game? And you don't have to talk about it. You just need to be together.
Yeah.
Those are great. It's just showing up.
Good.
Showing up and leaning in and not being afraid. And when this is the other big thing, sorry, I want to say, I know you want to wrap up. It's like
Oh, no, go
when
for
it's
it. Yeah.
awkward, because it's awkward. There are
Yeah.
times I have said, I don't know what to say. I don't have the words.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the best I have right now is, I'm so sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
People would rather you say, I don't know what to say,
Yeah.
than say something like, oh, they're in a better place. They'd rather go,
Mm-hmm.
they we would all rather hear, I'm sorry, I'm awkward. I don't know what to say, but I want to be here for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 100%.
Boom.
Absolutely.
You just saw the person in grief and
Yeah.
they feel witnessed in their pain. And you became vulnerable for them, that you gave them a place to feel safe and trust.
Yeah. I love that. And I just want to go off of that too, just a little bit more, because there's something like I've experienced, and I think it kind of comes off from that awkwardness from people not knowing how to handle grief. Is like, when you first have the loss, there's a lot of support around you, and then it just like fizzles out. And then like,
Disappears.
yeah. And I have a few friends that like check in periodically, and it means the world to me. And I think, if you have someone who's gone through grief and you're like, oh, I don't want to bother them, I don't want to say anything. Like before I went through grief, I think I was that person. I didn't know to check in on people. And so,
Well, we all were, because we didn't know
yeah,
differently. Yes.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like I can say, like, now having experienced deep grief, like that means so much. Like a few months later, just like, hey, just thinking about you, just checking in. You don't have to respond, but I'm thinking about you. Like
Yep.
that
Yep.
means the world to
Yep.
someone who's going through something. And like I actually had one of my friend's moms who was like really close to me when I was growing up. She did that the other day for me, just like, hey, checking on you, love you. That's it. Like I was having this really, really hard moment. Like I was really having a hard time. And it just like, I just like the floodgates opened up, because it meant so much that like she just randomly was thinking about me. And it just like, it meant the world to me. So like, if anyone listening, if you're going, have someone who's going through deep grief, just check in them, like just check, even if you just say that, I'm just checking in on you and thinking about you. And then they don't feel like the obligation to maybe respond if they're not feeling it, but at least they know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I almost think, so there's certain, like a few friends who've lost their parents as well. And I actually put those dates on my calendar.
That's really nice.
And actually the year that they passed, so then I can remember how many years now, because I don't remember outside of that.
Mhm.
But also sometimes I think putting a reminder in your phone, like maybe once a month, every 6 weeks, every 8 weeks,
Mhm.
to do that reminder check-in. Like
Yeah.
that's an easy reminder put in the phone, because everyone's there in the beginning.
Mhm.
And then at 3 months, you're really starting to come out of the complete shock,
Mhm.
but everyone's gone on with their life. And at the 3 month mark, you really start to feel alone.
Mhm.
And then it continues. And like I've had people come up to me and going like, aren't you over it yet?
Oh my gosh.
You
Oh
know? And I'm just like, no,
no.
I'm not. Thank
Mhm.
you for your asking. I'm just like, no,
Gosh.
you
Yeah.
know, or it's like, you haven't moved on yet. I'm
Mm.
like, no, I'm learning to live with it. These are
Mhm.
people who also haven't lost.
Mhm.
Um,
Mm.
so, but it's still,
Stings.
ruffles the feathers a little bit and stings.
Yeah.
It's like,
Mhm.
oh my goodness, that was not comfortable.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't want to be the person who's like, even though I do grief education, I don't always, in my personal life, I don't always want to educate everybody
Yeah.
on it. So
Mhm.
I merit, what's my capacity?
Mm-hmm.
Do I have capacity in this moment? Is this someone I'm going to see again or not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, and then other times I'm like, "Mm, I wish I still had your innocence."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that doesn't stop me that if they have a loss, like I'm going to show up for them because
Mm-hmm.
I know what it's like.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. So that
And
just,
we find new friends in this journey. And I think there's a new depth because that outer shell got broken.
mm-hmm.
And I read a lot and I'm really exploring, on my morning walks, just really contemplating like impermanence. It's just
Mm-hmm.
like, huh, I'm
Yeah.
past more than half my life now.
Mm-hmm.
What do I have left? And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not getting younger, I'm getting
Yeah.
older. So,
Mm-hmm.
and no guarantee how long I have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the world in the state that it's at, I'm like, where do I want to spend most of my time and with whom
Yes.
and how?
That's a question you could ask yourself every minute. And
Yes.
it's so important to ask yourself that.
Yeah.
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 Mm-hmm. Yeah.
COVID, I think, really opened up the doors for
Mm-hmm.
us to start exploring this. This is why I think grief has really um, become something less taboo and more that we're talking about because so many people have experienced grief
Yeah.
since COVID came.
Mm-hmm.
And more of us want to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
we need to because
Yes.
grief heals in community.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't heal by yourself.
100%. It's like as you're saying, it just reminded me of like this was a gift that happened, but like I didn't know anybody who lost their sibling. And so, I had people who had gone through grief, but it was a different dynamic. And I'm like, I said to my husband, like, I just wish I like knew
Yes,
somebody who's been through a sibling loss because it's just like a different
it
loss,
is.
and like
Yep.
just have different experiences with them. And we're part of the momentum community, and literally I think I put something just in there about my story, and someone sent me a message just saying like, hey, I don't know if you want to talk, but I lost my brother a few years ago, and I can relate and I would love to chat with you. And so I ended up getting on a phone call, a Zoom call, and we're like friends now. So you talk about that new community, like, now we're supporting each other in our businesses, and it's like been
Yeah.
a really good connection. But it's like that was like a gift that, like I said it to my husband, I wish I had somebody, and here it was. And
Mhm.
so I reached out, and now it's like a new person in my life.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
Yeah.
amazing. But it's like, just asking for that support, like you're being supported. You just have to ask and be receptive to it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I want to talk about the receptivity of all the signs,
Yeah.
synchronicities, messages
Yeah.
that come through. They're subtle.
Yeah.
We as humans expect them to be like fireworks or something really big or like it's a
Yeah.
big neon sign. And
Yeah.
no, it's a butterfly.
Hmm.
It's a song that comes on the radio just at the right time where you hear the words you just needed to hear. It's that random book you open up in the bookstore and you read a passage and you're like, whoa, how did you know I needed that? It's
Yeah.
that oracle or tarot card you pick and you're like, whoa, I really needed that. Or it's that phone call. It's someone checking in on you.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
all of these.
Hmm.
These are the signs from our loved ones kind of guiding and directing to go like, hey, send them a message because I can see they're hurting.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is what we can open to. Like we miss them when we're in the pain. But if we know that they're that small, like a card in the mail, or
Hmm.
someone sent me, they didn't know this, they sent a dandelion card with just one seed popping off. And I'm like, oh,
Oh
how hilarious
my
is that? Or
gosh.
you're in a store and you see, your loved one's name,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
That's them just going like, hey, I've
Yep.
got you to think about me because I'm
Yeah.
thinking about you.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you feel not so alone in it when that
Yes,
happens.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, because that is like that has been my experience too. And I think it's like if you're not receptive, if you just start opening yourself up to it, you start to see more of that in your life. Yeah.
And if you just know that they're small,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
they're not, you know, lights on Broadway kind of thing. They're
Yeah.
really small. Like it was that woman who had the dog that looked like my mom. And then for her to say, yeah, I lost my mom too. And I know this is hard. And an absolute angel. And I've noticed that when I share in public places when I am having a grief burst, I'm just like, oh, it's a grief burst. People
Mm-hmm.
often go like, I'm sorry. Or
Mm-hmm.
they just walk away. But it's amazing that when you actually just say, go up to the till and you're just crying, and some people are like, what? And I'm like, I'm just having a grief moment. The energy of people who are just like, oh my gosh, I'm really uncomfortable because someone's crying, literally goes to, sorry. And
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean they change anything. I don't need anything from them,
Yeah.
but you
Mm-hmm.
just feel their energy shift and just like hold space a little bit. Everyone just kind of softens in it, and they're just like, oh, or hey, I hope you have a better moment and a better day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we can open up to more kindness in this world.
Absolutely. And it just makes you realize, like, even just being in the grocery store, you have no idea what someone's going through, at that
Correct.
moment around you. And if,
Yes.
just like you said, if you can show a little bit more kindness, you have no idea how far that will go for that person.
Yeah.
And it makes such a world of a difference, especially if you're going through something really challenging.
Yeah.
So it's just like, and then, also too, it's very healing when you take yourself out of what you're experiencing and you can see that there's other people experiencing other things. Like you can get stuck in your own little world, but you realize like, oh, we're all going through challenges in our
Yep.
own way.
Yep.
And we're all in this, we all share the same commonality. We're not so separate like we may think we are.
Well,
Mhm.
we all share grief. We will all experience grief on some level or the other, unless we go first.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
I remember this one woman, I used to work in a bank about 15 years ago, and she was the crankiest woman.
Hmm.
And my branch manager at the time was like, oh, good luck with her. And I'm like, but my whole premise has always been like, everyone has a story. There's a reason.
Yeah.
And when I found out the reason, she'd lost her daughter, and her granddaughter was now going through cancer treatments and not expected to live. And she was her primary caregiver for her granddaughter. And her daughter was now living in a care home facility because after an accident, she couldn't be cared for at home and was suffering with major brain injury. And we just had the most wonderful connection.
Hmm.
And when she left, my branch manager was like, what did you do?
Hmm.
And I'm like, I just got to know her for a person.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so when people are angry, that's another way, like I said earlier, of expressing grief. Like
Hmm.
there's hurt
Hmm.
in there.
Hmm. Yep.
And if we would just stop taking everything personally
Hmm.
and just go, wow, they're really angry right now, or they're really sad.
Hmm. Yeah,
Something
absolutely.
something's going on, and I'm not going to make a story about it because I
Hmm.
don't know unless they tell me.
Hmm. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And
Then
just
you
then
can still
show for
send
more
love
compassion.
and kindness and compassion. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And then it just raises you up when you can be compassionate versus being like maybe annoyed or prejudging somebody.
Yeah.
You actually heal through that. So yeah,
Yes.
it's for you, but not for other people, but it's also very much for you as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Hannah, I love this conversation. Like, this has just been, like I said, this has been amazing to talk about. And I
That's
just know it's
lovely.
going to help so many people. And I want people to be able to connect with you, get any resources you have. So where can they find you?
You can find me at endandafter.com,
Mhm.
and on Instagram and Facebook I'm End and After Medium. And so I specialize in an animal's end of life journey and helping pet parents through that. Um, but I also offer grief support sessions, and some people reach out to me whose parents have Alzheimer's or dementia and they want to know how to navigate. So I don't keep it specific to pets, but you can always reach out to me and we can figure out how I can support them or help them that way.
I
Yeah.
love that. And I'll put everything in the show notes. So for anyone listening, definitely connect with Hana. And again, thank you so much for everything you shared today. I truly enjoyed this.
It's been absolutely lovely.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Amazing. And again, thank you for everyone who spent your precious time with us. Like,
Yes.
just grateful. And I hope that you can just take something through from this and just really change the dynamic of how we experience grief in the world. So
Yeah.
thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Rewiring Health. I hope you found our conversation both enlightening and empowering. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to Rewiring Health so that you never miss an update. Also, I would love to hear your thoughts. If you could take a moment to rate and review the show, it would mean the world to me and help others discover the power that we all have within us to create change and create the life that we truly, truly desire. Thank you so much for spending your precious time with me and sharing the energy of the show.